a calling. And while we were talking, she told me something that I won't forget. She said that the two most important roles in her life were being a counselor and a mom. And she said, right now, I feel like I'm failing at both. And so many parents and educators here in Virginia and across the country are feeling that. And you deserve to have your stories heard, knowing who you all are. So even after 30 years of teaching, actually it's been more, they were kind, it's 36. I still get excited at the start of a new school year. And I know that you know how this feels. You know, I love the possibility of the brand new clean notebooks, you know, the smell of the newly waxed floors as you walk into your school building. And I love the sounds, you know, the quiet student, you know, as you're waiting for them to come in. And the murmur of ideas bouncing back and forth as we explore the world together. And the laughter and the tiny moments of surprise in materials that you've taught like a million times. You know, but this year, I mean, look at this year. These feelings of excitement have turned into anxiety. And some rooms, I mean, some classrooms are dark because the bright young faces that should fill them are now confined to boxes on a computer screen. And while other classrooms are open, they are full of unknowns all summer long. And I'm sure all of you had this as well. Family and friends and colleagues are calling me and asking me the same things. Are our schools going to reopen? Should we send our kids if we do? And how am I supposed to juggle working and overseeing my kids' learning? And how do I keep my family safe? Right? Haven't you heard that like all summer long? And there's one thing, you know, if there's one thing we've seen in this crisis, it's not that just schools are places where our children learn. They are safe spaces where students find purpose and purpose and friendship. And I don't care whether that means you're in first grade or it means you're in community college. They're safe spaces for our students. And they give parents the ability to focus on their careers and support their families, knowing that their children are safe. And yet, this crisis has shown us the deep inequities in our system, especially for children of color and low-income communities. Many lack the technology, including access to broadband. I'm sure you've seen it. And they need, you know, the broadband and the internet that they need to succeed in remote learning. And so many kids, and I've seen this again and again, all over this country, are going hungry without school breakfasts and lunches. Still, educators are rising to this moment. I've heard from so many who are working overtime to reach their students, deliver meals, or connect them with the technology that they need. And our communities are using every ounce of care and creativity to get through this, because it's what we do. We find ways to make something out of nothing, you know, to see beauty in challenges, to mentor and guide our children, even through chaos. And across this country, Americans in all walks of life are putting their shoulders back and fighting for each other. We haven't given up. We just need leadership worthy of our nation, worthy of you. And that's my husband, Joe. You know, he understands there's nothing more important to our democracy or the future of our nation than giving our kids the kind of quality education and schools that they deserve. And he has a plan to address this pandemic. He knows that schools are going to need funds to keep the staff and the children safe with protective gear. They're going to need sure that, you know, classrooms can physically distance and and make sure that students have access to broadband and other technology if we're going to continue with remote learning, and we just don't know how long that's going to be. And both students and educators are going to need more mental health support to deal with the trauma of this pandemic. And even before this pandemic, that's the one thing that I heard universally from teachers across this nation. And he knows that we need to build our education system back better than before. He's going to invest in our schools, especially those who need it the most, the Title I schools that need funding and revitalizing and modernizing. So many classrooms are crumbling. And he's going to invest in our students, making sure that they have all the nurses and the counselors they need. And I've seen this too. I mean, they've just cut the nurses and the funding. And he's going to make sure that every American child can go to quality, free preschool, expand the community school model, and provide the opportunity for students to attend, this is my favorite, community college, debt-free for 2 years. And he's going to invest in our educators, like all of you. And he's going to make sure that we get paid competitive wages and have access to the lifelong opportunities and that help us to, stay up to speed. And he's going to support innovative approaches to recruiting teachers of color because he knows how much that matters. And that means supporting high school dual enrollment courses that give young students an edge in teacher preparation programs. And it means helping our paraprofessionals work towards their teaching certificate. And it means working with historically black colleges and universities and other minority-serving institutions to recruit and prepare teachers. It's crucial. And at a recent back-to-school event, a special education teacher told me something that her mom used to say to her. And she said, her mom used to say, "You were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason." And that's an idea that Joe has always understood. And he knows that the best policies don't come from politics. They come from listening to educators like us. And that's why I'm here today, to listen to you and then to take your stories, all of your stories, back to our campaign so that we're ready on day one to turn this around. So I want to thank you for all being here, for sharing your stories with me today. And so thank you. Thanks. All right, whose did I take? Yours?
I have my own thing.
Okay.
So we both have.
Then we're set. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biden. Thank you for sharing those words with us. We really do appreciate it. And I'm so excited that you are here to listen to what teachers are saying. So often people talk to teachers, but seldom do they listen to them. Mm-hmm. So we appreciate that you're going to come here and listen to us and carry that message back.
That's right.
Thank you. We have some educators here with us, and I'm going to give them a chance to quickly introduce themselves. If you'd like, you can let us know what your area of expertise is, what you teach, and how long you've been doing this. Okay, so we'll start, and I believe you may be the student, are you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dorian Black. I am currently a graduate student at Hampton University studying for my master's in teaching and music education. Currently, I'm from the Hampton area, and I really appreciate this opportunity. I really thank you. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Newby Alexander, and I am a dean at the College of Liberal Arts at Norfolk State University, one of Virginia's 5 HBCUs. And I am also a professor of history who specializes in African American history. And I've had the opportunity to teach both at the high school level for 4 years, as well as teach at the college level. And I actually teach a lot of teachers. I conduct multiple workshops for teachers, and it is my desire to get people to understand that knowledge is the most powerful thing you can have.
Yeah. I love that you mentor teachers. That's great.
Good morning. I am James Fetterman. I am a vocal music teacher from the Eastern Shore of Virginia. I am currently on leave as I'm serving as the president of the Virginia Education Association, and I'm privileged and honored to be here with you this morning.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Janaz Joyner-Pace, Hampton City Schools English teacher.
Yay!
Yes. I teach 8th grade. I've been with Hampton City Schools for about 30 years now. Twice a named Teacher of the Year in my school building, and Teacher of the Year for Hampton City Schools middle school teachers last year.
Congratulations.
As I said, been working in Hampton City Schools as an English teacher for about 30 years. I did start my career in teaching as a paraprofessional teacher assistant, and of course moved on, saw the need, and got my degree and able to teach, and now I have a Master's of Education.
When Joe was vice president, every year we had the Teachers of the Year come to our residence to celebrate them.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My turn. Good morning. I'm Hillary Brown. This is my 16th year teaching. I started in Chesapeake City Schools at a Title I school. I taught 1st, 3rd, and 4th grade. Loved it, but I love math. I'm a math teacher, English teacher.
Oh. Other side of the frame.
Yes, I love math, and so I said I just wanted to focus on teaching, the skills to build upon, life skills that we can use, like balancing a checkbook. You go shopping, that type of thing. But now I teach 8th grade. 8th graders are just like 4th graders. They want their stickers. They want the acknowledgement. But I love it. And I thank you for coming today.
We get that. Anthony, can we take off our masks if we're socially distanced? Where is he? Can we take off our masks if we're socially distanced? Yes, we can. Okay. All right. Just wondering.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And let me just also add that although I am the state delegate and I'm serving as president of Hampton Federation of Teachers, every 5 years I get recertified, because the joy of my life is to be able to keep saying, I am a state certified teacher.
Yeah.
And it's middle school and it's language arts. And I just want to let you know also that I got my start in community college.
Oh, good for you.
Thomas Nelson.
Wow.
Yeah. So shout out to community colleges also.
Thank you.
And now we're going to ask a few questions of our panelists. And thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate it. The first question is, how has COVID changed your experience in the classroom? We're going to ask that question for each one of you. And then if time allows, we'll have more time for the other questions, okay? If you like to pass, you can on that one, but you can also answer.
Honestly, I don't have a problem with beginning answering. So teaching, as far as for me, I don't have as many professional years graced as the people before me. However, with my experience in teaching how I did, I believe I started becoming an educator way back in middle school. I started that educational journey, and even though I didn't personally know that's what I wanted to do, it's something that I inherently became doing. And I found that the reciprocity that comes with teaching is more than any money could give me. The smiles, the help that I can give, always more, right? But when it came to the virtual, it became a lot harder to get that social emotional connection with my students. Virtually, yes, they can understand the concepts and they can get it, but a lot of students, as far as from the background African American, a lot of times they're very apprehensive. A lot of students want transparency and they don't know what that looks like because their everyday life doesn't show them that enough. So because of that, it becomes harder for them to be able to be selective in their choices of people to trust. It becomes a little easier, high school, college, because you start to be able to dictate. But look, in today's time, now the generations got a little confusing with the internet, because the more you add to it, it's always there. So that means that's more we have to filter through. I believe if we teach students to learn how to filter those things a little easier, even virtual becomes something that's easily navigable.
Okay. Thank you.
So speaking as one of the oldest people in this circle, I've been
Wait a minute,
teaching.
I think I got you beat.
I know.
Not by much.
I don't know.
I've been teaching for 35 years. And I actually love the idea of teaching virtually, because it enables me to introduce students to so many things that they may not have an opportunity to see within the classroom setting. I love both platforms, but I've taught so much. I'm an online certified teacher, and so I know about all the different ways that you can look at the world. And I'm also a big science fiction fan, so it gives me some opportunities to think outside of a box and to bring people into the world that I'm talking about. And the classroom doesn't necessarily do that. Some people have tried by wearing costumes and things like that, but to take people to those spaces virtually and to talk about it, and I believe that your enthusiasm in teaching and explaining and expounding and telling stories pulls people into the scenario, and it helps them to imagine. And sometimes face-to-face can be a distraction, but when they hear your voice and they see these spaces, it takes them into that world in a way that they may not be able to get into in a face-to-face scenario. But I do know that for many of the faculty that I supervise, we're the largest college in Norfolk State, a lot of the faculty have had struggles, and I've talked with them individually as well as collectively. And once they take that bold step to get out of their safe space that's comfortable, that's familiar, and they start thinking outside of that box, it reinvigorates their enthusiasm, and they begin to imagine a different way of approaching a topic that they're quite familiar with. Yes, there are still those who struggle, but it's the attitude that you have to work on to get them out of that space. And once you get the teacher out of that traditional way of thinking, they draw their students in, because teachers have the most powerful influence on a child, and I would say in some cases even more than many parents.
You know, that's an interesting perspective, and because I have not taught online yet. I took the training this summer in July to become certified for when I go back to the classroom in January. And, but I have to go back to what you said. I mean, I think that trust, that one word that you said, trust, is so important, because I think our students sort of innately trust us. And they tell us things that nobody else, they may not have told anyone else. And I know as a teacher of writing, I mean, people, my students tell me things that sometimes I think, oh, please don't tell me that. But, you know, they depend on us, because they don't, a lot of students don't have other people in their lives that they can trust. And they come to us for guidance and for empathy and for sympathy. And, you know, so I have to agree. I mean, I am a classroom. I love the traditional classroom. But I hope I get to where you are, where you say, you know, teachers pull those students out of those boxes, and the teacher has to pull, in my case, myself out of that box as well. So that's an interesting thing. So I may be calling you in January for some help.
Be my pleasure.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your comments. I really appreciate that, because it shows me your sensitivity to your students. I see that.
So from my perspective, COVID has really amplified what educators have been saying all the while. There are serious inequities within our classrooms. There are serious inequities within our communities, and specifically those communities of color. And I like to remind people our children are like credit cards. We can pay now or we can pay later. So we have to invest so that our return is greater than Johnny walking through the street, trying to find ways that he can destroy the community versus using the school as a place to build the community. And this opportunity that we have, even with COVID as bad as it is, it has really amplified the message that broadband is a major issue. And I don't know what happens to the signal once you get close to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, but where I live on the Eastern Shore, it just doesn't travel over very well. And I'm from an area where we're doing well, and the signal is not where it needs to be to deliver instruction. So we have to find a way to increase our ability to provide the broadband to our students. Many of them are just struggling to make ends meet when we were in a normal situation, if it was ever normal. And many educators were basically disenfranchised. Many of them were scolded for trying to provide food for their kids because they knew what the children were living in. And now, all of a sudden, because of COVID, we're providing 3 meals a day when we should have been doing it anyways. So I'm hoping that we're going to use COVID as an opportunity to really say we messed up and we can do a lot to fix it. And I believe, Dr. Biden, that your husband and Ms. Harris, they have the plan to make it happen.
Thanks. Call me Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
And, you know, I'm sure you've read Joe's education plan, but, you know, broadband is a major part of it. So, I mean, we certainly, all of us have seen the inequities in this system. And that's why he called his plan the Build Back Better plan, because, you know, we have to fix so many things. So we really have to look at this like an opportunity, right? Rather than really what it is, which is just so hard to fathom the virus and how many people it's killed. But we have to look at this as an opportunity and figure out, you know, how we're going to change things for the better, like you're saying.
I could go on and on about this. I agree with my fellow educators here, but as a teacher, of course, of the younger student, let me say those who are trying to find themselves, because I'm at that 8th grade level. And so students are so needy, and they need someone, again, that they can truly trust.
Yep.
And so for that socioeconomic part for me, that's very important, because I feel as though I can teach you in a car, I can teach you on a star, I can do all those things, but I've got to be able to build that relationship with you. Please allow me to share that just the other day, as I had my students, and we were on Zoom, and I can see all of their little faces, and I saw one box go away for a while. And of course, I'm concerned, and so in the chat box, I privately chat to my student. I said, what happened? Where are you? And when the student returned, he was able to share with me that there was a policeman at the door. And I said, if I were in the classroom, I could chat with you and pull you to the side and have that conversation. But in the chat box, I'm trying to reassure my student that it's going to be okay. And I shared briefly, I said, well, is everything okay now? That sort of thing. And he did share that everything was okay. It was for another member of the family. But I know that's going on in the homes. And it kind of tears at me because I can't get to them and sure it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, and I think we are masters at reading body language. You know, you see the kid in your class who puts his or her head down or faces the wall, you know, instantly you know something's not right. You know that instantly. And see, I mean, that's what your student needed you at that moment, you know, to say, hey, I'm seeing this, I care about you, and I'm trying to connect with you. And thank you for that.
Since this is, I'm math, and I'm coming from elementary, so I'm very animated, and I'm a very All right, look at me. We're here. All right, we're moving over here. Are you with me? All right, thumbs up if you're with me. So that has had to change to where
Yeah.
I am this big now on their screen. So with our core one, we teach in the same school. We have a morning meeting every morning where we share things like, all right, out of these three, which one has to go? And we ask them, now we're getting to the social emotional. All right, if you have $500, what would you do? And it blew my mind how many students said, I would help my mom pay her rent. I would go to a homeless shelter and feed this many people. And they're 13, and they see this going around. You know, some boys, I would get the Xbox and the new, but, you know, they're children. But to see the empathy in these children is blowing my mind, where we're asking them to show up 7:50 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, to have a bright smile, out of your bed, hair down, you know.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So we are acting with grace in a lot of instances. You showed up. Thank you for showing up. You know, I keep getting kicked out, but you came back. You know, I'm sorry, Miss Brown. My internet is trash, as they say at, 13.
Yeah.
It's okay. You came back.
Yeah.
You warmed my heart. We had a student on the way to a doctor's appointment. I'm in the car on my phone. If you don't see my screen, I'm on my way to a doctor's appointment. I said, you made my day. You could have just skipped class, but you are reaching out. So on that aspect, I'm seeing the empathy of the children. They're trying. They're trying. On the other hand, where they're at home with only God knows what going on, because a lot of them unmute and it's a circus, but they're logged in and they're chatting me, and I'm just trying to praise them for showing up at this point. But I have to teach them Pythagorean theorem, and I have to teach them these huge concepts, but they,
That
did you
just
eat?
gave me the shivers. Here.
I'm sorry. But I'm just happy they show up. And before I finish, I do want to say I'm a proud union member of Hampton Federation of Teachers, Local 4260. Yes, I forgot to say that in my introduction.
Well, I was a proud union member too when I was teaching in the high schools. So I was like you. I taught in high schools before I went to community college. So, yeah, NEA, my union. But both the unions are great. And they both came out and supported my husband, which I was like, they've got to support Joe. He's married to a teacher. So, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And the food insecurity that you're talking about, it's major, isn't it? It's major, and this is one of the inequities I think that this pandemic has exposed. I mean, I know in my own classroom, I have a red tub in the front of the room where people can bring in, whatever, water or whatever to share with other students, and food. And then we take it to the food closet because so many students are food insecure. And we don't expect that in America, do we? I mean, we just don't. But it's a reality.
They're not only food insecure, but some of them are home insecure. We have a
Yes.
number of homeless
Yes.
students, and one of the most important things to our president was to open up our dorms because some of our students were homeless. And the only place they could actually be was in a dorm. Otherwise, they were on the streets or in a shelter of some sort. And so people really don't realize or appreciate the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on the African American community and on the young people. And many of our students also are having to work full-time,
Oh, yeah.
supporting their families,
Yeah.
and going to school full-time. And so the debt crisis for so many college students is humongous. It would take their entire career to pay off that debt because of compound interest. So I'm not only a supporter of free education for young people at the community college level, but for young people who are committed to contributing to their communities, I'm a supporter. I think that anyone who commits to serve their community should have their college debt paid for once they've completed it and they can move on, and even getting assistance while they're in the process of completing it is so essential for so many of our young people.
Well, and in Joe's plan, if a family makes less than $125,000, they do get free education at a state school. So, yeah?
Okay, 2 points really quickly. So I appreciate everything I've heard from my panel. You know, again, I'm a very young educator, so I love hearing these other perspectives, right? I want to say that I feel like in addition to what all has been said, we have to be very careful because we've now seen how technology can show us just how difficult it can be, and we don't want to become so reliant on something that it can take advantage of what we need for upward mobility. And that's not just per race or class, but that's as a humanity.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, we have to know how to manipulate both, whether we're talking in class or not. And that, in my opinion, with how I teach, comes from concept teaching, being able to take those things abstractly and apply them into the multitudes of what life will be presenting to you in the first place. It's not to say that you have to give them every single detail of where it can be applied to life. It's to take that and let them know and inquire the many ways in which you can perceive it, because those are rights and wrongs that end up dissolving to be if and situational circumstantial. And the other point I wanted to make out involved just really realizing we have to want to start looking at educators as the agent of change. And yes, agent of change is recognizable in the sense that we like to see, we like to make the situation easier, but I mean change in all ways, shapes, and forms. Whether there's a student that's currently in your classroom right now that's struggling with an emotional distraught or confusion in what is they're learning, or there's something that's happening within what educators have to tolerate and deal with. Advocacy has to happen for everyone.
Yeah.
So I believe if we decide to look at ourselves as advocates of positive change, that then changes what the purpose is that we push out. Not only are we pushing out information, but we're pushing out information with the intent for it to uplift you no matter where you're coming from, no matter what circumstance and no matter where you start from. So Dr. Biden, Dr. Biden, I really, Jill, ma'am, I really appreciate what all you and your husband are working towards. I really do. From where I come from and my uplifting, and I know my story is not too much different from many, but it's one to tell. It's not easy starting so low and it being expected to climb so high with not everyone telling you you're doing a good job. When you are doing a good job, or with someone telling you you're not doing exactly okay when you need to make a correction and just letting you fly by and letting it happen. We want people to show changes that show the growth of humanity, and we have all the tools. We just have to organize them and help those who need what tool when. And there's never a concrete answer for that. It's always evolving like the world that we live in.
And look how inspiring you are. So what are you doing to help bring in more teachers of color, especially males?
Yes, and that's a major point that I do my research in. I didn't mean to tailor this off to me, but this is one thing that me and my student teacher that I'm working with, Ronzel Bell, right? We're talking about this information that, yes.
I know him.
Great educator, fantastic. All love comes from that. Love in mind comes from that in his students. But when we talk, one of the things we discussed about after one of our classes, I brought up the point of we have a very firm understanding of what the mother of learning is, and that's repetition. We reach that all the time. The mother of learning, repetition is the mother of learning. We use that phrase, and repetition shows that. Every time we repeat an idea or a task, it makes it a little easier the next time we introduce it. But I question, what is the father of learning? What do we recognize that to be? And what I pose would be confidence, okay? Being able to know exactly what it is that you want to have produced with the confidence and being able to take responsibility if that goes the way it should or shouldn't. Simple as that. Mr. Bell argued it might be, the father of it would be demonstration. Okay, being able to show us mimicry of what that should look like in real time. But one thing that we could easily come together in on a point is the fact that the reason why we might not have such a solid term is because there aren't enough male teachers to figure out what that solidified reason would be, to be able to know what that analogous term would be so that we can start saying that, and then we can start seeing what that role really looks like. And it's not to solidify to a certain sex or a certain race, it's simply to help us all. We have plenty of analogies that that contradict themselves, but situationally, they work for that moment.
Thank you so much. And I just want to mention that I have provided you with 2 male teachers. Thank you. I've got both of my sons, And now we are, okay.
One of the things that I have found, and excellent points, but as a black male educator, I'm exhausted because we are expected to do it all. We're expected to be content masters. We're expected to be disciplinarians. We're expected to be healers. We're expected to be motivators. We're expected to be fight breaker-uppers. and we're expected to calm the raging seas. And while all of this is going on, something is not getting the attention it needs, and that is the instructional methodology. And in many ways, we get the most problematic children in the building because we don't write referrals. Dr. James Comer once said, no significant learning takes place without a meaningful relationship. And we seek to build those bridges. We seek to calm those raging storms. We can look at a student and totally de-escalate it by just the look of our eyes. And if we should happen to put our voice in the conversation, we can bring the strongest giant to tears. We are the only profession without the need for a scaffold, and we're doing it each and every day. But as a black male educator, we are exhausted, and we coach, and we coach, and we coach. But when it's time for those opportunities to move up the chain for promotions and all of that, we're often overlooked, not because we can't do the job, but they want our value to stay confined to that classroom. My name is James Fetterman. I approve this message.
I approve it too.
I thank you all so much. You know that we are so behind with our questions, but we're covering them anyway. And I think what's most important to Dr. Jill is that she hears this type of discussion, and we are answering the questions. So we have a couple more. I'm going to throw one out at you. You don't have to answer this one if you'd like, because some of what you've already said has been covered. But what are some of the systematic barriers educators of colors experience? And I think we've heard some, but if anyone would like to add to it, maybe one person. Anyone want to add to it? I'm going to go with James.
Sure. I think one of the most significant things we could do right now is to find meaningful ways for loan forgiveness. So I'm very fortunate to have a PhD, and I've gone through the tests and challenges of all of that. But many educators are leaving institutions of higher education poor because the amount of money that we have to pay back, it takes more than half of our paycheck. And not to mention, if we're fortunate enough to meet someone to catch our eyes, to call them our spouse, then we are now living on 2 half incomes trying to make ends meet. And when we're blessed to become parents, that income becomes smaller. So I think when we can find meaningful ways for loan forgiveness,
That's in Joe's plan.
and I read it, and I'm thankful it's there.
Yeah.
I am too.
$10,000 a year for community service, for service up to 5 years. So that's $50,000. I hear that all over about teachers who are working multiple jobs. They're leaving their classroom and going to drive an Uber, you know, or they're working on weekends. I hear it so much.
So thank you. We're going to create some good trouble.
I didn't mean to
get
cut you off.
No, we're going to get you guys elected. We're going to make it happen.
Another question is, how can we best provide support for educators of color? Support for educators of color.
You know, one of the most important things that I've seen is that many educators of color coming into HBCUs or majority institutions do not have the support system behind them. Having been educated myself at a majority institution, you're on your own. You do not have many mentors to help you. In fact, you have the opposite often. And so there needs to be that kind of support, but there also needs to be a really strong look at the testing. Because when I look at the questions on those standardized exams, not only is some of the information wrong from a historical perspective, it is just wrong,
Yeah.
but it is decidedly focused on a master narrative that is white male focused, and that then gives an edge to whites
right.
over blacks or Hispanics or anyone else. If you're not in that culture and you're not at those schools or in those programs that automatically focus your attention to answer the question the way it is given and the answer that's expected. And so, because of course you probably know the standardized exams were designed to keep people of color out of this country in the first place, and to make an assumption that they're less than, inferior to whites. And so we haven't gone too far from that foundation of what we put in standardized exams. I believe that educators should have a broader analysis of what their qualifications are than a simple standardized exam. And that standardized exam, when it was put in place, was designed to keep people out.
That's why we need a strong Department of Education, a strong
Yes.
Secretary of
yes,
Education to change
yes,
some of these things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, my
Betsy
goodness.
DeVos is gone.
Janaz?
If I could talk just a little bit about the classroom teacher. When we found ourselves in this position where we were going to be virtually teaching our students, some teachers, of course, at home, they have internet and they have access to being able to teach. Some teachers who did not have that found themselves going into school parking lots and trying to connect to the web, to the internet there, so that they could be effectively teaching their students. So those are some of the challenges that classroom
we've seen.
teachers have met. Mhm,
We absolutely have seen that. You're right. Yes.
One quick point. So, and I definitely want to tailor it from the panelist to my left. Her point, she really brought up the historical context, which is throwing in a lot of confusion in our educational process, right? Another thing that kind of continues that issue becomes our narrative that we want to push multiculturalism and diversity in the classroom, yet when we're helping our students decide where to go, we're either telling them to choose an HBCU lifestyle or a PWI. It literally narrows between one of the two. The students have to choose either, do you want a better quality education or do you want to have a fun personal experience through your college career? And I don't think there needs to be a choice, but I feel like it really starts when we start to teach in the public schools what multiculturalism and diversity really is. And we keep saying, you know, as educators, we learn, you know, you want to be transparent, you want to be open, you want to be receptive to students, but that's not telling you what you should expect on the opposite extreme. And a lot of this, honestly, in my opinion, it can be comparative to how things are being handled in the racial justice system on the same end. It needs to be recognized, the details of what's going on, to be able to make an informed decision. So in this case, when we have multiculturalism and diversity that happen, we have kids that leave the classroom and then have fun stereotypical jokes that happen, and they don't know how to turn that on and off. So then when they come back in the classroom and they see a person that doesn't look like them, they respond with those stereotypes based off of what they know. Now all of a sudden they've misunderstood how to take joking from seriousness, and now we're having an issue where our fun and our professional is merging so much with the personal. That's another issue that my students are seeing. That personal and professional are merging forcibly so much that they don't know the differences. They don't know how to do that time and place management now. No one really does, in some senses and cases. And so, again, educators, I feel like we have such a control, because we have to learn how to be able to work with people at every stage of life, whether they're infant or near the end. And I hate to say it like that, but that's just the honesty. So when we know how to work with those systems, that's what made me say the agent of positive change. Because if we can know how to work with those people from those different groups, if you align yourself as an educator with what you would be preferenced with, as long as we can keep multiculturalism and diversity, you don't have to pick and choose what race you would more likely to be working with, or what class of students you would rather work with. You're worried more so, maybe I'm more so with this age group because I can work with these students that are dealing with puberty, or I can work with the high school because these are young adults that just want transparency. You know what works for you, but we got to eliminate those extra variables and extra factors that should not be a part of what we're deciding. Sorry, I use a lot of hand motions.
I think we all do.
No,
I think it
it's
is
called
something
passionate.
of.
It's called
But I-
passionate, not emotional,
Yeah,
passionate.
but I
Yeah.
think that is something I see a lot of teachers doing. I do that all the time on the floor of the house, and I'm defending a bill, and my hands are all over the. But I do. I want to thank you all so much for your comments. We could go on and on.
I was going to say, are
and
we
on.
finished?
We are.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, I'm watching the clock and people are winking at me, you know. I understand. Look at them. They're watching their watch right now. And so
I know, I'm ready to, stay a couple extra days. I mean, we have a lot to discuss.
we do. But you've got this opportunity right now to say anything you're